President Biden is in Japan for 4 days of meetings at the G-7 summit, and some of the biggest banks' CEOs will meet Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen today to discuss the nation's looming borrowing limit. Good morning, I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. President Biden has arrived in Japan to attend the summit of the Group of 7 industrialized nations. He's already had a bilateral meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Biden told the Japanese leader they'll discuss the war in Ukraine and joint efforts to keep the Indo-Pacific region open and safe.
As you said back in January when you were at the White House, I think the quote is, we face one of the most complex environments in recent history, security environments. And I couldn't agree with you more. But I'm proud that the United States and Japan are facing it together.
Biden will stay in Japan until Sunday. Then he'll return home quickly to oversee negotiations with Republicans on the debt ceiling crisis. The CEOs of some of the biggest banks are scheduled to meet with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen today. As NPR's David Gura reports, at the top of the agenda is the debt ceiling and the potential consequences of a federal government default.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is expected to tell bank executives what she's been saying to Congress, that the U.S. may be unable to pay its bills in a matter of weeks if lawmakers don't raise the debt limit. This meeting, with a group that includes the CEOs of Bank of America and J.P. Morgan Chase, along with the heads of several larger regional lenders, has been on the books for a while now, but its focus has narrowed. This week, business leaders have been sounding the alarm. In a letter to President Biden and congressional leadership, more than 100 executives called for a deal. A default, they said, cannot be allowed to happen. David Gura, NPR News, New York.
Officials in Ukraine say Russia has bombed parts of their country again. This time, they say Russia fired missiles from the Caspian Sea region. There are casualties reported in the southern city of Odessa. Russian missiles were also fired at the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, but Ukraine says all of those missiles were shot down. A man convicted of killing 8 people and injuring many more has been sentenced to life in prison by a federal court. From member station WNYC, Samantha Max reports the man drove a truck into a crowd of people on a New York City bike path in 2017.
The courtroom was packed for the day-long sentencing hearing for Sayfullo Saipov. More than a dozen survivors and loved ones of the deceased read statements, often through tears. They called Saipov a monster and a coward. Saipov, who was sentenced to multiple life terms and an additional 260 years, had also faced the possibility of the death penalty, which is still legal on the federal level. When it was Saipov's turn to speak, he did not apologize. Instead, he gave a lengthy speech about Islam and praised Allah. The judge said he hoped Saipov would one day feel remorse. Saipov is expected to serve out his sentence in a highly secure prison in Colorado. For NPR News, I'm Samantha Max in New York.
This is NPR.